We kind of joked about it when we came up with the title. We're like, okay, well, whatever, we'll see if that sticks. But really, my job is head of product, right? So I lead product management as well as technology strategy. And I'm here to sort of take the company forward in a new, not new, but in a focused direction around and leveraging AI, machine learning, natural language processing to help serve our university, partners better, if that makes sense.
Hey everyone, and thanks for listening to another episode of the Chief AI Officer. Today I'm speaking with Stephen Drew, who is Chief AI Officer at Ruffalo Noel Levitz. Stephen, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks. Yeah, pleasure to meet with you today. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting started and talking about AI in the education sector in particular. Before we do that, can you give our audience a little bit of background on yourself and maybe where your journey with AI started?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm relatively new to RNL, which is what we typically refer to the company as. I've been here about 7 months. So prior to this, I really, other than spending a lot of time in school, like a lot of us do, I don't have a significant amount of background in higher education. I came here from a couple different SaaS companies. So I was with Five9, which is a contact center as a service company. When I worked for a startup called Unifor based out of Palo Alto, which is a conversational AI startup. But I got into sort of this natural language processing conversational AI arena when I was at Cigna Healthcare, where I spent several years there leading the global customer contact, customer technology platforms for the company. And, I recall it was probably around the time when we were making heavy investments in natural language IVR, speech-enabled IVRs, et cetera. I recall telling my team, and this would have been like, gosh, 8 or 9 years ago, like, what you're doing now in like 6 years, this would just be called AI. And they're like, nah, come on. It's like, no, I think so. Like that's, it just felt like that was the direction that things were going. Those early attempts, right, at having sort of this human like conversation, self-service conversation were so pathetic. But there were little, kernels of hope, right, within that around speech recognition and, the some of the advances in NLUs and stuff. And so I think it was around that time I thought, okay, I think I'm just going to like focus in this area. It was really interesting to me. And I kind of pursued roles, in that direction since then. And, had the opportunity to join this company last year as its first ever chief AI officer. We kind of joked about it when we came up with the title. We're like, okay, well, whatever, we'll see if that sticks. But really, my job is head of product, right? So I lead product management as well as technology strategy. And I'm here to sort of take the company forward in a new, not new, but in a focused direction around and leveraging AI, machine learning, natural language processing to help serve our university, partners better, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, you were spot on with the prediction. I feel like NLP, LLMs has become very, very synonymous with
Mhm.
AI. And funny that you're in a role as kind of head of product, but you are titled the Chief AI Officer because I'm almost thinking AI has become so synonymous with technology these days and product these days in the
Yeah.
software space.
Yeah, we came to that conclusion, but Bill, who's our CEO, and I think within like 3 weeks. Because when I joined, it was just me. We're like, well, we'll figure it out. Like, we know that we wanted to invest in new technologies. We want to really make a focused effort to kind of infuse AI into our existing products and services. And we weren't quite sure how we were going to do that. And then very, very early in, we're like, actually, let's just combine the product team and then build an AI team and just make it all one thing, right? That way, there's sort of a single voice leading the direction and the strategy, and it helps us move very, very quickly, right? I think, maybe over time, it won't be as necessary as it is right now, but in this moment for this company, bringing those two functions under one leader was a good idea. It's been very effective, and it's allowed us to move pretty quickly with some releases of products recently, and those will continue.
Yeah, I think it speaks a lot about the strategic direction as a product leader as well, right? That it doesn't just bring those things under one roof, but that almost every capability is probably developed with some sort of AI first mindset.
Yep.
And it's an interesting space right now. I think chief AI officer, this show is called that because I've been interviewing a lot of people that they're cropping up everywhere. I think even since we launched the show, it's become a lot easier to find people with this title because it's become such a focus. And so I'm really excited to talk to you today about how you see that vision for product and AI and also in higher ed in particular. I mean, you've touched on that a little bit, but is that vision of an AI first kind of fusion of product and AI, how you see integrating AI into RNL solutions?
Yeah. The company had a good history of using machine learning models to do a lot of different things. I mean, we're basically a marketing agency for higher education. And, we take on the role of helping universities bring in, their incoming classes, whether they be freshmen or graduate, adult learners, graduate students coming in. And then we also help with fundraising as well. But all of that usually starts with a list, right? What's the optimal sort of targeted list of people to market to and recruit, right? To bring in and to the university and meet their enrollment goals. And the company's been doing that quite well for a long time using very well designed, explainable ML models that, pretty much just work, right? So, now we're thinking, okay, well, how do I build on that and kind of wrap those existing capabilities with, more user friendly, experiences, right? Maybe with Gen AI in particular, I can take what used to be a particularly time consuming task around processing data and preparing it for, the models and generating the outputs. Maybe I can take that and build a conversational experience around that whole thing that allows our university partners to take advantage of these models on their own, right? So we're really looking at kind of merging the two, keep doing what we've always done, but then take advantage of some of the newer capabilities that LLMs provide to make that whole experience a little bit faster. And that's worked out, quite well. And then there's also just the stuff that we've never done at RNL in terms of using conversational AI or conversations to drive better outcomes, engage better with students, parents, and donors, get into data and understand it better. So ultimately, though, I see it all kind of coming together where we're never going to lose sight of the power and importance of good, well-designed, fast machine learning models. And then we just kind of augment that as appropriate with other, more shiny new things.
Yeah, I like how you phrase that. I think a key thing you said was also well-designed, efficient ML models that are explainable, right? And Gen AI can run into trouble on that explainability front. How are you dealing with that?
Well, I tell our clients when I meet with them that it's like, the greater the capability, the lower the explainability, right? Especially as you move into models that are based on, neural networks. And so it's hard, right? Because it's opaque in terms of really explaining, well, how did that happen? I mean, you even read the headlines and you hear guys, at the top of the game running companies like OpenAI saying, well, we don't even know how it works. Well, if they're saying that, what are we supposed to do? Like, I don't know. But I mean, we understand. So what we focus on more is being upfront about the limitations of these technologies and talking about that first, right? So we approach every conversation with, here's the downside of using large language models. Here's the use cases that are highly problematic. Here's where error rates simply will be unacceptable for the use case that we're talking about. And we try to teach our clients that first and our employees. And I think that, if you appreciate the limitations of the newer, very large pre-trained, language models, it helps you make better, decisions for the business and better decisions and give better advice to your clients. That's how we approach things. And then we use, I know we probably don't want to talk about vendors, but we partner with another company that's kind of gives us a good responsible AI governance platform. And so we use that to manage our use cases, evaluate the risks of those use cases, determine, mitigation strategies, and then ultimately we make a decision like, this is just a stupid idea, we're not going to do it, and this is a good idea. Sometimes this, what we would consider a stupid idea, other people are doing, right? And that's fine, right? It's all like relative. But for us, we tend to lean very much on the proceed with caution and generate significant awareness around the limitations and risks, and then kind of move forward, eyes wide open.
Yeah, I
That
think
makes
that's
sense. Yeah.
a great way to step into it with
Mhm.
customers with eyes wide open. We've also found, that obviously there's immense power with generative AI and LLMs, but when you're looking for more predictable systems, more explainable systems,
Mhm.
that you use the term, you're using LLMs to augment some of your ML models. Like we use almost LLMs to augment our formal models and kind of like reasoning models in our engine, which is much more reliable and predictable. And I think in terms of students and donors and the use cases that you're seeing with customers, right? There's this immense ability today to personalize and to have that conversational experience, right? How do you find that balance between the systems you're using and what are the kind of experiences that you're building with customers for their students?
Well, so far, I would say the things that we're building are relatively basic, right? I mean, we're driving, good natural language, helpful conversations, right, with students or parents or donors, depending on, when and how we're engaging with them, and using the, technologies like large language models helps us create a more flowing conversation. We're kind of past the old world of intents and NLU and always being like just one step behind what, the person might say. So I think we've kind of solved that problem, pretty well. And I think we're doing quite well now around, entity extraction from, the various things that people say, and then from there sort of directing into self-service experiences. And that applies to analytics too, right? So we're partnering with another company to deploy kind of talk to your data conversational analytics solution. And it's extremely effective at taking just a general unstructured natural language input and turning that into insights in the data in a way that would be extremely difficult to do so otherwise. On the personalization front, we're moving in that direction. And it really goes back to this idea of taking advantage of the machine learning models that we've built over time and making them better so that we're really kind of getting this sort of segment of one, from a marketing perspective, and then using the generative models to create very personalized messages on the fly for our outbound campaigns. I think we'll have that soon, and that'll be very, very helpful, right? Because it kind of takes advantage of both the very accurate classification tasks that we can perform on one hand with the sort of prose generation, capabilities on the other side in a really, nice way. But still a little ways to go before I could say we're like hyper personalized in terms of our outreaches that we're doing today.
Thank you for that. That's a great overview of some of the things you're doing. And
Hmm.
you mentioned before that some use cases, you're very upfront about the use cases, right? The limitations of certain technologies when you're talking
Hmm.
to customers. Are there areas that customers are asking you to get into that you feel the technology is just not capable of delivering on right now?
It varies. I think most universities are really a big topic of conversation is just how should we approach things like ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot, what have you, and students. That's kind of the big question. Like, is it appropriate to give students access to these systems? Is it helpful? Is it a bad idea? We don't quite play in that area intentionally, right? We're more about helping universities run well. But when those topics come up, I mean, if asked directly by leader of university, what would you recommend we train our students on in terms of effective use of AI? I would say what I said earlier, which is teach them the limitations first. Start with the framing around, well, like what makes sense and what doesn't, and how these models work, and understanding that will help hopefully the student make better decisions. But we tend to shy away from things like, give you an example, LLM based course advising. It sounds great, like, okay, let's build a virtual advisor that helps people make excellent selections on their career paths and courses and all that. But there's some problems within that you're going to run into just in terms of accuracy. Anytime you're using RAG, right, as your underlying sort of logic path, you're running into a level of error that in some cases just going to make it like unacceptable. So
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of things that you could do that you shouldn't do, right? And that's kind of where we operate most of the time.
Yeah, no, that
That
makes
makes
a lot
that
of
makes
sense.
sense. I know I kind of just
No,
but
that makes a lot of sense. I want to promise the audience that that wasn't a plant because that's such a perfect, what we do at Elemental Cognition is build neurosymbolic AI applications, and we have a platform that enables customers to do that. And one of our use cases in higher education is specifically course advising. It's so funny that you said that because that has always been the fear in that space, right? Is that
Mhm.
you are advising students on like some of the most critical choices that they're going to make throughout their student pathway, in their careers and their lives. And they need to know that if they take these recommended courses, they're going to graduate on time, they're going to have all the recommended course credits. It's actually a difficult constraint optimization problem because there's a set of finite resources, there's certain paths that they can take based on certain classes that they take. And it's a great use case for something like our system because our system uses Gen AI just to help the university formalize the rules and the constraints and kind of get the data in order. But then
Mhm.
all of the solutions are actually generated by a like symbolic reasoning engine, which can be 100% accurate and reliable and
Yeah.
traceable. So I again have to promise the audience that that was not a plant. You did not know that.
Well, there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of opportunity to create cool and
Yeah,
amazing things for universities.
yeah,
And we're pretty much focused on the things that RNL's always done, right?
yeah,
And then we will say, maybe not yet, right? For other cases. And I think it's just important, right? Because things seem so simple, on the surface, right? But when you get into actually putting these types of solutions through the ringer, you start to get a sense pretty quickly that our error rates or hallucination, as people call it, are sometimes, highly, problematic. And that's where we pause and say, yeah, like, no, maybe later. Let's see where we're at in a year, right?
yeah. And that's I think a
Yeah.
situation that will always be a problem with us, right? In terms of that hallucination, at least from
Yeah.
the data that we're seeing right now. I want to touch on one thing that you said before that too, which is about helping the universities run effectively and run efficiently, right? Because they're probably approaching you with a lot of AI project. We're in a time right now when people are excited, right? They're coming up with use
Mhm.
cases. How do you help them prioritize that and invest most efficiently?
Yeah. Well, we are rolling out a governance sort of consulting framework. So I think in many cases, when you meet with the schools, there really aren't any policies in place around appropriate use of AI, appropriate use of Gen AI, how to handle data, and where and when, et cetera, except for the larger, more, I won't say sophisticated, better resourced is probably a better thing to say, schools. So we recommend to start with just some basic sort of grounding in how to think about managing all of the potential use cases that you have, evaluating the benefit against the perceived risks of using whatever technology you are, and then kind of building some priorities around that. We also just say start, I mean, like anything, right? Start simple. There's a lot of, I think, hesitation in many industries to take advantage of conversational assistants because they've been so bad for so long. I mean, we know how bad they are, right? I mean, it's just horrible. It's not the fault of the people who built them. They were just limited by older technologies. And, to the point I made earlier, you can never, ever estimate, predict the things that people are going to say. And so the NLU is just never good enough. And it's this constant battle to tune that. And, now that we're starting to get past that and have effective conversational systems that take advantage of LLMs, and I would recommend that a school, really consider that as a easy first step, provide an opportunity for a student or a parent to engage without having to navigate through 27 layers of content in a website that's probably not even, accurate. So that's a pretty simple thing to do. But what I found is that most of the schools that I've been talking to are mostly interested in what we're doing around data and analytics, right? And understanding their CRM and SIS data better so they can make better, decisions around, planning for their upcoming campaigns, whether they be fundraising or, enrollment.
Got it. So those are very
Yeah.
much like building RAG based systems on their CRM type. use cases or?
Yeah, not quite. So we have we kind of partnered with another company to put the solution together, but it's really natural language interface to structured data, right? So there
Right.
is some
Yeah.
some RAG element to it, but the result is moving past dashboards and data analysts and time delays to get to the answer that you need, and kind of getting straight to, as a end user, what is it that I'm actually trying to figure out here. That seems to be a really great use case for universities, and it works well.
I think that's a great use case for, I mean, a lot of businesses are trying to get that, right? Where we had death by BI dashboards for a long time. Yeah.
Exactly.
And in terms of some of your previous roles, you've mentioned a background in LLU and conversational assistance. I still find it funny that chatbot is kind of a dirty, unspoken word, right? Because of all the bad experiences that people have had.
Yeah.
What were some of, you just gave that conversational interface to kind of like a BI dashboard example. Are there any other successful AI implementations you think are good places to start?
I mean, we only do three things here. We talk to unstructured data, we talk to structured data, and then we facilitate conversations with backend systems to allow people to do things, on their own. And for the time being, that's kind of all we're going to do. And honestly, that's all I've done for the past 10, 15 years, right? It's easing the burden on operations and call centers, right, by allowing consumers to do more and more things on their own. What we're doing is saying, well, if I can effectively talk to my unstructured data and talk to my data, I have these good sort of conversational models, let's start using them to interact with all the things that RNL does, right? So instead of, for example, waiting on a school to provide vast amounts of data so we can advise on how to distribute their financial aid dollars effectively, interact directly with the model, bring in your data, generate the results on your own. So we're seeing a lot of good potential around self-service. And I think eventually we'll be at a point where we're generating sort of ML models on the fly based off of sort of the unique needs of a university and their stated sort of predictive challenge that they're trying to get into. We're not there yet, but that's the direction that we're going. So for us, ultimately, it will be products that we built that are ready to go that universities can easily consume, and not so much around bespoke engagements solving, like a one-off, challenges. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. I mean,
Yeah,
productizing, scaling.
Yeah, when I ask, does that make sense? It's only because I'm worried that I'm not like articulating the idea effectively. It's not in any way questioning your ability to process.
No, not at all. I think, that is something that a lot of companies struggle to do, right? Is how do you productize these types of things to not have them so connected to services that make it hard to scale? I would imagine that as you have built products like that as well, it's also made selling into universities and educational sectors that have a lot of data privacy, a lot of, on-prem deployment constraints, just things that just by nature of the sector that you're in cause a lot of friction in the buying process. Is that fair? Are there any other challenges you see in that sector?
I think it's you're spot on, especially, think about the work we do for undergraduate enrollment. We're dealing with data sets that are minors, right? These are high school students. Massive data set, right? There, all these details that we're using to help the university determine of this large population of potential students, who are the ones that would likely be a good fit for my school, who are the ones that are most likely to apply, who are the ones that are most likely to be accepted and ultimately graduate. And so when we went about building our systems here, the first decision I made was that we would, not be using external commercial language models like the ones that we all know. And so we chose to go the open source route, and we manage, language models privately. And so we're able to, offer significant guarantees around data privacy that would be difficult, to do so otherwise. And that's gone really well. Luckily, the Llama 3 came out. I was a little worried, but the timing was good, and it's great. And especially when you combine that with RAG and knowledge graphs, right? You can get really good results. And it's all done within a protected, contained environment that's not sending traffic out to, third-party hosted, language models.
Yeah, and I
So
think
that's been kind of the number one way we kind of offer immediate assurances around data privacy and data security.
I think that's something that is playing out across a number of industries right now, as everyone is talking about building their own models or just connecting into these systems. That's going to become such a critical concern that, government,
Yeah.
education, any large enterprise
Yeah.
is going to be very wary of sharing their data. It's certainly something that we see with our customers as well. As you build out these solutions, selling them into, the educational sector in particular, how do they measure success of these initiatives, and how are you kind of proving value with those customers?
Most of what we're talking about today is relatively new for RNL, right? We just launched our first AI products in June. So we have a limited number of universities that we're working with. They're pilots. And one of the three products that we're rolling out this summer has not been released yet. It won't be released until August. So for the first two, which is the conversational assistant and the conversational data analytics solution, we've got a few pilot universities that we're working with, and now we're starting to see some opportunities come in, at a pretty good clip. For us, it's about, are we delivering, a level of ROI for the client that, is in line with, our stated capabilities and their expectations, right? This is a pretty simple equation. I'm working with you because you're purporting to be able to solve a problem for me that would be very, very challenging for me to do in some other way. And if we do that, then, we'll continue to work with you and do more business. I think for conversational assistants, there's not a lot of good empirical data around, usage for various types of use cases that we're targeting. But other industry data shows that there's certainly a preference, right, for that type of engagement. And so we'll be looking at, how much better are we managing the funnel? One of the things I learned shortly after joining RNL, which I keep in the back of my mind, was around graduate online programs and how the best predictor of program selection for an adult learner is the school that accepts them first. Right. And it made sense to me because, we're busy and we get this idea. I think I'm getting my master's in public health from Imperial College London. Why am I doing that? I don't know, because I like statistics and it's fun. Right. But, you get this idea in your head, okay, I'm going to get another degree and go back to school. You find, I've applied to school A, school B, school C. I just wanted to do it. Right. And so, as an adult establishing my career, whatever. I just want to get going. And so the ability to speed up that process and, get them through the pipeline, get that decision out the door faster could really make a big difference to a school's, graduate online programs. And those are some of the things that we're specifically trying to help with, is get the student or the prospective student through the process faster. And then we're also looking at evaluating, applicant packets using AI models so that we can offer not a final decision, but a recommended decision faster, right? So again, you can just improve the accelerate the admissions process. That's one thing. On the analytics front, it's more about, am I getting insights to things I couldn't before? That's kind of the big question. Okay, well, why would I go away from my dashboards and do something new? Well, because I have a question I've never been able to solve. And if you can answer that question for me and everyone has a different one, that's valuable. And that's sort of a proof point that, hey, this was worth my time. And that's the feedback that we've gotten so far, is I'm able to get into a level of understanding my data that I was not able to before. And for now, those are that's what we're basing things on.
Yeah, and I think that to that last point, that has potentially transformative value in a number of ways, not just for the people that are querying that data in a conversational interface, but for the people that, that used to be looking at dashboards, but for all the people that it's democratized access to that insight for, right? The people that aren't necessarily as trained at looking at dashboards and extracting the relevant insight from them. It is a skill.
Yeah.
And I think that enabling a conversational interface to something like that actually creates more value than we might even expect at the very beginning.
Yeah, I completely agree. Completely agree with that.
And I think you touched on a few of these in terms of responsible AI and governance and things like that. But do you have any kind of parting words of advice that you would give organizations that are looking to adopt AI?
I would say take the time to follow competing voices in the field, right? There's just enough disagreement around some of the core concepts that we're dealing with that it's worthwhile to read both. And I give a presentation, right? There's in the same day, two people who I follow on LinkedIn who I think are absolutely amazing. One is saying, here's why synthetic data is a great thing. And here's another one. Here's a paper that explains why synthetic data is a really bad idea, right? And we can look at like 100 examples of this where two knowledgeable voices are saying something completely opposite from the other. And we should take the time to really pay attention to that. Read the Stochastic Parrots paper, right? It's short. Just take the time, take the time to inform yourself of the underlying limitations of language models, the potential bias based on the training data, how synthetic data can potentially perpetuate those biases, right? If we don't educate ourselves on that, then we're more likely to buy into whatever hype or whatever someone's selling. And so I think just taking the time to better and, educate ourselves on the significant limitations of AI systems and large language models is really, really important. And sometimes my customers get a little tired of the conversation, right? Because I'm just so passionate about it, but I really believe it's important. And I think that universities on the whole appreciate that, right? They want to ensure that they're doing the right thing by their students and they're employing these technologies, appropriately, but it requires a little bit of time and reading, That's my parting word of advice. Read the Stochastic Parrots paper.
That's
Please.
Very, very good advice and very in line with how we think about all of this at Elemental Cognition. I mean, you mentioned people on LinkedIn. Do you have a few people you would recommend following for people that want to get into this space?
Timnit Gebru, you have to. If you're not following Timnit Gebru, then you're doing yourself a disservice. If you're not following Gary Marcus, you're doing yourself a disservice. If you're not following Rajiv Shah, right, who's amazing, you're doing yourself a disservice. Sebastian Rashka, right, and his amazing tutorials. Like there's guys from Cohere and from other companies. Jay Alamar is absolutely out of this world the way he explains these difficult concepts like how transformers work and stuff like that are people that I religiously, follow. And clearly they don't agree with each other, right? And they don't know me, right? But I appreciate the time that they take to post their ideas, on LinkedIn, which is obviously such a great source for all this. But you've got to sort of decide okay, these are the people that I'm going to kind of trust, to follow. And that's, what I've done.
No, that's a fantastic list. Thank you for sharing that. I highly recommend any of our listeners go follow all of those. And if people want to follow you and your work, Stephen, where should they go?
Well, I'm pretty private. So I'm on LinkedIn and I click like on posts. And once in a while I say something like, check out the new thing from RNL. But I'm, not the type that, does a lot of writing and shares it. But yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. Please, connect with me. And Roger on my team, as mentioned earlier, I'm hoping that, he's thinking about a podcast around responsible AI. Our national conference is coming up. The focus is responsible AI in higher education. Look forward to chatting again sometime.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on the show, Stephen. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you.